It's another chilly day with the tower fan going on in the background, and I wanted to piggyback on a previous audio. I touched on something and I wanted to elaborate on it. I touched on the fact that there are some people that have skills and a college education for jobs but can't keep a job due to their piss poor work habits. And I believe I touched on this in a previous audio, but I want to talk to the parents about certain things that they need to drum into their children in regards to jobs. Now, let me give a brief history lesson in regards to people of color for those of you who don't know. And I think I've spoken on this before. An African American experience, once we were emancipated and allowed to have our freedom to be able to live where we want to live and go where we wanted to go due to certain legislative acts. Education was our ticket to economic freedom at some point in time in history. So in every household, it was drilled into children to get a good education because that was the way to economic freedom at some point. It was a parent's duty to emphasize that a child get at least a high school education, if not a college education. There was a point in time that a high school education was a guarantee to a stable economic life, and a college degree was a guarantee to wealth at some point in history. Okay? So it was automatically understood that a child got an education, period. There was no negotiation. There was no way around it. As a matter of fact, in the Deep South, if you were part of a family that didn't emphasize education and you were African American at some point, other African Americans didn't associate with your family because you were ostracized. Your family was ostracized. You were considered low class. You were considered not to be associated with because your family was not, you just weren't considered, you just weren't considered acceptable. That was not considered acceptable behavior because you were not trying to keep your family strong. You were not a credit to your race if you were not trying to emphasize education in your household, at some point in time. So, of course, things have changed over the years, and I cannot say for the better. But what has happened recently, fast forward to now, is one mistake I noticed that parents have been making. Now, parents, of course, a child's duty is to get an education, period. That's their job. If you're a child right now, the only job that you have and the only responsibility that you have in the household, because every person in the household has a duty or a responsibility, period. If you are part of a family, everybody has a job or a responsibility. You're not just there taking up space, taking up air, and doing nothing. Everyone has a responsibility or a duty, period. That's the way it is. And your duty as a child is to get an education so you could be a productive member of the family, be a productive member of the society. That's the way it is. That's the way it's going to be, and it's not going to change. So your job is to get an education, you can acquire a skill or whatever the case may be. And I applaud my people of color by, trying to emphasize that. Okay, let's say you've done that. You've taught your child, okay, they've gone through school, they got to high school, they've gone to college, they're getting their education probably on the honor roll and the whole 9 yards. They've done that in that regard, but the thing that you forgot to teach them is how to conduct themselves as a human being in the workplace. You've taught them how to study. You've taught them how to conduct themselves in school, how to get the scholarships, how to take the courses, how to study, how to navigate through the organizations, how to do the resumes, how to do everything educational wise, how to get the degree, how to navigate so you can get the job. Yes, you've taught them how to do everything scholastically, okay? You taught them everything scholastically. You taught them everything from the time that they were in preschool all the way through the time that they got their degree, what they needed to do book-wise to get the degree. And they came out with flying colors, all honors, letters behind their name, and everything else, but not an ounce of work ethic knowledge. They don't know anything about being on time to work. They don't know about the levels of organization within the workplace and how to communicate effectively with employers. No clue. Basic respect. They haven't been taught how to work as a team. They haven't been taught networking skills. They haven't been taught how to adhere to deadlines. Basic things. Basic things. See, while you were teaching them how to hit the books, you didn't teach them how to hit the time clock. Because a lot of the times in a lot of these cases when they were working jobs, they were working jobs where the jobs were centered around the schoolwork. So they probably didn't have regular schedules like everybody else. They probably had, everything was centered around their school, centered around them. Everything was centered around their school, their school, their school. But now that they're out of school, see, they have to understand that they have to go into a system, into a workplace where they have to confine to somebody else's system. They have to go according to the job system. And I have seen a lot of young people that are qualified for jobs, look great ink on paper. Successful internships, all the qualified skills, all the classes, graduated, but from day one, late to work, late from lunch, calling out sick unnecessarily, failure to communicate, or bad communication with superiors. Simple things so they can keep their job. They can get the job, no problem. They can get the job, but they're unable to keep the job because parents failed to tell them the simple things that they needed to do to keep a job. And this is not just a high-tech job, any job. And I see a lot of kids that know how to physically perform the duties of the job, but as far as their work ethic, they don't have one because they weren't informed of something as basic as that in all those years of learning this profession. Software engineers, nurses. I've heard the stories. Flight attendants, late to work all the time. Long lunches all the time, calling out all the time, and will get fired from jobs all the time, written up all the time, failing to communicate with supervisors in regards to issues, not being insubordinate as far as disrespect, just not communicating, period. A failure to communicate is just as bad as communicating badly. Just not saying anything. Something breaks or an employee doesn't show up or an event doesn't occur that's under your supervision and it's your responsibility to let the owner know and you don't say anything. And when you're asked why, oh, well, you can't give an explanation, but you're a college graduate in this field and you didn't say anything. Why? You're let go and you're wondering why. But ink on paper, you have all the qualifications for the job, but you just fail to. Late most of the time. unable to reach you in important things like meetings and things like that. Failure to be on time half the time, always consistently 10, 15 minutes late, almost every single day with a failure of explanation. Just simple things like this. And it puts the supervisor or the owner in a state of confusion because they're like, this person is a perfect fit because they know this business, but just simple things like that, it drives them crazy. It really does. And eventually they wind up letting the person go because they just can't afford to lose time behind someone who cannot grasp simple, common sense things. So parents, I implore you, while you're teaching the child to hit the books, give them simple tips on how to conduct themselves at the job. Because once they get the job, it's up to them to keep the job. Teach them how to work as a team. Teach them how to be on time and to work effectively. Teach them the basic things that they need in order to keep the job instead of being a job hopper. Because job hopping looks very bad on a resume. It really does. It looks just as bad as not having any experience at all. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and let you guys go. Peace to you.